Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Barnyard Broadcast. I am your host, Maddie Horkler, and I am very excited to bring you guys this episode today. We are going to dive deeper into selling retail or wholesale meat on this episode, and I'm very excited to have three guests with me. They are Jason Scott from Scott's Roasting, Jodi Gauker from Gauker Farms, and Rob Hess from Berks Creek Farms. Without further ado, let's get into the conversation. All right. Hello, everybody. Again, thank you so much for your willingness to come on and be a guest on this episode today. I will introduce myself first. My name is Maddie Horkler. I am the host of the Barnyard Broadcast. And today we have three guests here. We're going to start off with some introductions. So, Rob, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yep, I'm Rob Hess. My wife Amy and I operate Berks Creek Farm in Hershey, Pennsylvania. We're just north of town towards Grantville. We operate about 350 acres, mostly in hay, and we raise registered Red Angus cows and calves, and then we direct market the majority of those calves for beef and sell a handful for seed stock.
Great. Jason, would you mind introducing yourself next?
My name is Jason Scott. My wife and I, Amanda Scott, and my family operate Sylvan Acres Farm and Scott's Roasting. We have about 140 farrow to finish sows, and we also do concession trailers and catering to produce our own product direct to consumer, and have about 500 acres of corn, soybean, and wheat, and some grass hay. And we do a lot of carnivals, fairs, and privatized events.
Great. And Jodi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Jodi Gauker. I'm a friendly neighborhood beef lady out of Berks County. My husband and I have Gauker Farms in Fleetwood. We raise about 60 head of Holstein, high energy Holstein steers that I retail direct to consumer. We sell about 50 head a year through our on-farm store and also to restaurants in the region.
Cool. So, as I said, I'm very excited to have you guys on today to go ahead and talk more about your businesses. So, we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. When you created your business, what first inspired you to start a retail meat business?
I guess I can start. It was a cash flow issue for us. So my husband is the ninth generation on the family farm, and they sold the dairy cows in 2006. And what was the next evolution of the farm? So they got some Holstein steers from the dairy farming neighbors and started raising them out. And we're just taking them to auction. And they ask in a family meeting, how do we make more money without, a huge investment with what we're already doing? And I said, well, why don't we, sell direct to consumer? We're already raising the steers. I'm still going to the grocery store every Saturday. Let's do something different. So we started that, and that cash flow from the beef business is what allowed my husband and I to be able to afford the mortgage to purchase the farm from my in-laws.
Well, I can go. This is Rob. I guess we took a little bit different path probably than what Jodi did. I was farming before we got married, but I got married in 1998, and we had purchased some registered Red Angus animals that we were using for breeding, and I wanted to find a way to generate more income from the farm. So what we did was definitely a little bit different. We really started in food service. We're very close to Hershey. We're probably only 5 to 10 minutes from Hershey Park, depending on traffic. And there's some larger restaurants that enabled us to enter direct marketing easier with probably less work and investment than trying to reach as many consumers, because we started selling in 2012, and at that time every single animal we had processed was delivered directly from the processor directly to the Hotel Hershey. And so we didn't have the investment of freezers at the farm or transportation. We were paying the butcher to take it. The retail evolved later, but the way we entered it was through food service.
Cool. So we're kind of starting to talk about just the beginnings of your business and what have you. And for the producers that are listening, what are 3 things you wish someone had told you before you started these businesses?
I would say the biggest thing for me is that you think you have an idea of what the consumer wants, and the consumer will ultimately prove you wrong. So every time I would pack up for the farmer's market. I would use my tally sheet because I had a tally sheet from the items that I sold the week before. And if I tried to pack similar or try to anticipate what the consumers were going to want that week, every time I was wrong and would take something else or run out of something too quick. So predicting consumer trends is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
For us, I would say when you don't realize all of the input costs, the assumption is that it's going to be, way more profitable direct marketing than it is, selling to at an auction or contracting or whatever the case may be. But once you're in a position where we're processing right around 100 animals a year, and until you pay the insurance and you have an investment in a walk-in freezer and insurance for retailing beef, you need to be priced higher than you would ever imagine to be profitable in what we're doing. That's probably would be the single biggest thing that I would say.
If it's okay, I'd like to back up. To answer that question, I almost have to go back to where it started. So in 1990, our main farrowing barn burnt down, and we lost all of our farrowing herd and most of the newborn pigs. A year later, we lost our farm shop with all our tools, started rebuilding, and we had a truck come in to pick up feeder pigs that brought TGE in and wiped out 95% of all our newborn pigs. And then in probably 93 was rock bottom for the open hog market. We've never been under contract. And out of, for lack of better terms, desperation, my parents decided that we needed to start trying to get our product directly to the consumer, because shipping to Hatfield was starting to shut buying stations down because they were containing all of their pigs to their own production. So being an independent in this industry was shrinking rapidly. So they borrowed money from family, friends, whoever they could, and built the first pig roaster. And we started going to fairs out of a tent to start trying to get our product direct from the farm to public. And for lack of better terms, it seemed to work at the time. But the one thing out of it I've learned is no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, when you're dealing with the general public, you have to have a thick skin, because you can try to give them the best product that you feel that is possible, and you're never going to satisfy 100% of the people. But doing what all of us are doing, trying to generate food for the general public, you have to take pride in that. And not everybody understands the work behind the scenes that we all put in, the late hours, the long nights. And you just have to take everything that comes your way in stride and try to progress and not regress off the times, commodities, whatever life per se seems to throw at you.
Yeah, definitely. That takes a lot in terms of farming, and it plays a big role in what we all do. So that's great. An amazing story there. So when we start talking more about the nitty gritty of actually creating these businesses or selling products, what type of regulations do you have to work with to be able to sell your meat? And, how does that affect the way that you guys do things on the farm?
We need a wholesale license to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture because we're holding the meat in our freezers. We also have a limited food establishment license that allows us to retail the meat on our farm and to restaurants as well. I would say the most surprising and really high cost that I experience is insurance. So our insurance for our farm and the meat business all runs through one farm, I guess, account, you could say. And last year, our insurance was over $17,000. And yeah, I just never thought that it would be that expensive for insurance for a business. But people want to think that licenses are really hard to get or really expensive. And generally, the licenses that you need are not. It's just the other things that are necessary in order to be able to sell.
I guess I would say that the one thing that's kind of maybe obvious to us, but not obvious to everyone, is when we started selling to a restaurant, we knew we had to be USDA inspected. So the product that we're getting is always USDA inspected. And then that worked out nicely to go to the retail side where we were able to do cuts versus portions of animals. So we kind of felt like that would be a better future, selling cuts versus quarters and shares. But it is very difficult moving that product in balance when you're doing it that way. But yeah, other than the licenses that Jodi referenced, I guess we're processing everything under USDA inspection.
Yeah, well, the same with us. I mean, all our hogs go to a local butcher shop and are all harvested under USDA inspection. And for our cuts of meat, everything has to be packaged under USDA inspection with obviously a USDA approved label. Our roast pork, we bring the animal back here and cook it and break it down, but it is not labeled under USDA inspection. So it is only good for a one-time sale. It cannot be retailed through a commercial setting. Our other cuts of meat, such pork chops, hams, and all that, is all packaged under USDA inspection. So it can be commercially retailed. And for the concession trailers, we obviously have to have a retail food license. So just dealing with that and the local health departments, every county has their own health inspector. Everybody wants to make sure your facility is up to their standard and code, no matter, since it's a mobile food unit, you have to notify every county that you come into or borough, and they normally send their inspector out and have to assess your facility when you show up on site.
That's good to know. I wasn't aware of those types of regulations, Jason. So we're going to do just a little bit more on farm and then we'll transition our questions. But for right now, on the farm, how has selling your meat changed or directly changed the way you manage or breed your animals?
I'll go. Is the one thing that I guess it really made me realize, probably, and it's taken every year I'm more sensitive to it, but I didn't realize the genetic differences to the magnitude that they are when we started retailing beef. And we definitely, for the animals that we know we're going to be processing for beef, we are breeding them for higher growth, higher birth weights, more efficiency, higher marbling, bigger ribeye size. We're going with much more terminal traits maybe than maternal traits, like we would for our replacement females.
We aren't breeding anything. We're just buying dairy calves from our neighbors. One thing that the one dairy has started breeding only polled Holsteins, which has been really nice because we don't have to dehorn then. It's just one less thing that intervention we have to make with the calf and one less opportunity for infection or something. So that I've really appreciated that, although we're not the ones doing those decisions.
For us, it's consistency of flow because it seems, whether it's tradition or just a time of year when people think about it, in the winter time and fall is traditionally when people would have their family butcherings or get-togethers, and everybody would process to have their freezers full for the winter time. And that's generally when the open market price was the highest if you had to depend on taking pigs to an auction barn. But as spring and summer wane, the price would drop considerably, and you would still have all these animals that are ready to go to market, but literally taking a loss on every animal that crossed the auction floor. So whereas starting the concession business and the catering, it helps, a lot of your events, your fairs and festivals are during the summertime. So that would help us pick up the slack as not having all these animals we're taking a loss on. Now we can get them through the concession trailers or to catered events and actually make a higher profit yield than just selling to open market. So it helps keep our flow of animals and flow of income much more consistent throughout the entire year, instead of just depending on the time of year that's considered butchering season, so to speak. It just keeps the flow that you can keep everything moving and generating income 12 months out of the year instead of 6 months out of the year.
So we're going to kind of pivot and go more towards the marketing aspect of this. And I want to kind of ask you, what are some different ways you market your product to just garner that interest or demand or set yourself apart from other products on the market?
Well, I started retailing direct to consumer through farmers markets. So we really spent the first 10 years building up our market through those pop-up tent in a parking lot markets. And I met a lot of customers that became family. Like I knew exactly, who their kids were, what community events they had coming up, who was going to prom with who, what the dress looked like, all the things. You kind of become invested in the lives of your customers. And then I stopped doing farmers markets 2 years ago, but a lot of those same people, we've retained that relationship because Jodi is their beef lady, and Jodi always will be their beef lady now until Jodi stops. So we still do, I call them not shady parking lot drops, where I will just meet them in the parking lot where the market used to happen. Or I deliver to Philadelphia to 2 restaurants there, one in Center City and one in Fishtown. And I do what I call not shady trunk deals, where I'm like passing black plastic bags of frozen beef, right on the Philly streets to their end user is very excited because they didn't have that in the city and now they have access to it. So I communicate on social media using Facebook and Instagram directly as we would be sitting here having a conversation. So my customers actually say, Jodi, I read your post and I can like listen to you reading it to me. And I strive for that. My customers are very invested in our farm. They know that I call my daughter Cheese. That's her nickname. And they'll see her out and about and be like, hey, Cheese, you don't know me, but I know you, which can be a little frightening if you're not ready for it. But it freaks my husband out every time because he's like, why do you know my daughter? I don't know you. But that's part of what comes along with building that customer base and building that relationship.
For us, we do a lot of the same with Facebook. Can be a wonderful thing nowadays. We do a lot of advertising on Facebook and also pictures of the farming operation so they can see that it's actually coming from where you say it's coming from. Because I feel like farm fresh or farm to table can be extremely overused nowadays. And a lot of people use it as a marketing tool, where the ones of us that are doing it, you can kind of take offense to it, because if you don't put the work into it, then it's a label of pride. So you almost need to be able to show that you are where the food is coming from, show the whole from start to finish, show the kids working on the farm, show the early mornings, the late nights, and just how everything is coming together, and people appreciate that. And that's how I think you can define your business, especially nowadays with social media.
So I guess, the one thing that Amy and I try to do is be as knowledgeable as we can be so we can actually deliver accurate information. I guess the one thing that maybe frustrates us is how people, I would rather say good things about how we do something than negative things about how it's perceived how other people might do something. Like I think it's for me, and I didn't realize this probably until the last few years, 10 years maybe, is there's people in the middle of Nebraska that don't have a chance of marketing meat like we are. But those people are more critical to the nation's food security than I am, right? I mean, I'm selling 100 animals a year, but I don't want to use my platform being close to a population to negatively speak about the way other people raise their product. And so we try to educate ourselves, probably through extension, on agricultural practices and why we do certain things, why we vaccinate the animals. We do it so we don't have to utilize as many antibiotics and things like that. So we try to convey accurate information from the agriculture side. And then being that we've worked with so many restaurants, we do use the restaurants to market our product to consumers for retail because if a chef has confidence in our product, I think it's more likely to illustrate that, that the consumer would have confidence in that same product. So, the other thing that we do is if a restaurant runs a certain special, it enables us to talk about that cut sometimes. If we want to sell on the beef side, hypothetically, if we want to sell more culotte or picanha, that doesn't sell real well in our retail store. So a lot of times we use that in restaurants, and then if they share information about it, we use that information to drive retail sales.
Rob, I'm probably going to piggyback a little bit on what you just said about consumers figuring out or what they do like and what they don't like. How did you find out, or what are some things that you found that consumers like and that they don't like within a retail or direct to consumer product?
So the two things that is biggest factor for us in beef is either people like fat or people don't like fat. And a lot of times that means they are more drawn to a New York strip steak than a ribeye. Or they're more drawn to a fillet than a flat iron or something like that. So fat is probably a large factor in consumer perception of the product. Yeah, I would think that that's probably the largest factor that I can think of.
Fat and consistency. So there was a time a long time ago where I had to use two different butchers. And one of the butchers, I really liked their sausage because the casing I enjoyed better than the butcher that I regularly use. But the butcher I regularly used was very consistent on the way they cut the steaks and the way they packaged burgers or ground beef, whereas the other place was a little more inconsistent and they didn't use like a brick mold for ground beef. They were just putting it in plastic bags and it didn't stack well. And a consumer makes decisions with their eyes, and the consistency, I didn't think it would be as big of an issue as it is, but it definitely is. And even if a steak is one size 1 week, they want it to be that size every time. So trying to make sure that you're consistent in the size of the animal and the thickness of the cuts that you get, things like that.
Could I add?
So,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
so funny story. One dislike, which if I guess you're not from the agricultural end of it, I mean, not that we don't care about our animals, but you kind of have a disconnect of this is what they're for. But when we first started the business, my grandfather thought it would be a wonderful idea to make an A-frame sign up to sit at the fairs with pictures of the farrowing unit and the baby pigs and all this. And that is not always the best idea. To not every person wants to see the beginning product of what they're eating. They might appreciate the end result, but they don't want to think about the process of how it got to that point. And what to us would be something that we appreciate because that's what we do. We take pride in it. The consumer themselves can't wrap their mind around, well, I'm eating this baby cow or I'm eating this baby pig, when that's not the way that we perceive it. I mean, it's to us, and I don't want this to sound, that we're not, like I said, care about our animals, but it's a commodity to us that we care about, but it's also our commodity that's how we pay our bills. So some people just, I mean, that would be a dislike. The farm to the farm to table or farm fresh is a great marketing resource, but not everybody wants to think about the beginning to the end.
And so the one thing that I was going to add is, I guess, thinking back to your original question about what consumers want or don't want, is a lot of times we have found that I don't believe consumers really know what they want or they don't want. A lot of their perceived demand is created by buzzwords and food marketing that they really don't understand what it means. And I think that that's where Amy and I try to take we really go out of our way to be able to describe why we do certain things. And where it really hit me was in 2012 when we started selling beef to the Hotel Hershey. I was thinking that they were going to want a 100% grass-fed product. And I was wrong. They wanted high marbling, high tenderness, animals grown in a conventional setting, not necessarily 100% grass fed. Now, obviously, our animals eat grass 100% of their life, even when they're on TMR, a percentage of that ration is grass. But I don't think when people approach you and they say, oh, we want grass-fed beef, they really don't necessarily know what that means until you explain that process to them and you enlighten them that that product is probably going to be 40% older than a steer that we're harvesting. And that age does factor in on tenderness. It's just a fact. So, I'm not diminishing any particular production method. I'm just saying in our case, our customers do want high marbling and high tenderness, and we try to illustrate how we achieve that with our own animals.
Again, just going along with the same thing of consumer preferences, what are some cuts or food items that turned out to be like one of your best sellers, and which ones sell really well that you weren't expecting to sell very well?
A lot has changed since COVID. So in our case, and okay, so it's not just COVID, but it's also the current cattle cycle has changed how people purchase beef. And so our best selling item was something, okay, it's not our highest dollar, but it's in our highest demand, was something that I never heard of until 4 years ago, is bavette or bottom sirloin flap. We sell out of that steak all the time. It's an awesome steak. It's like skirt steak on steroids. It's thicker, it's tender, it's really good. I never heard of it, and because we started getting it cut because I saw somebody doing it on Instagram, and so it's become in high demand. But a huge difference between 2020 and right now is our sales of ground beef have drastically risen in the past 2 years. And I think that's because people still want beef, but they need to resort to a lower cost cut.
I would agree with everything Rob said. And some of the more unique steaks, like the Choice Major or the Petite Tender, people try it because I used to do a share where you would get a certain dollar amount of meat every month, and I would just pick things. And consumers would try it and be like, oh my gosh, I love that. I would have never tried it otherwise. The same with the bavette or the coulette steaks. They're becoming increasingly popular among people who want to have a steakhouse experience at home.
So for us, our one product that I never thought would work, I never thought would be anybody would even want it. I always make a joke that every time my wife, Amanda, would be pregnant with one of our children, she would get these off the wall cravings for food, and she would come up with something, and the next thing you know, it'd be a menu item at one of our trailers. And our one product is called the Hog Trough, and it's an open-faced sausage sandwich with onions, peppers, potatoes, and homemade sausage gravy. And I said to her, I said, there is nobody that is going to want a sandwich with sausage gravy on top of it. I said, there's no way. And it turns out that that's probably one of our highest demand products that we do.
That's fun. I guess, yeah, I guess I would have never thought that either, but I mean, I can see it. So when you're going to sell these products, no matter what they are, how do you ensure the proper pricing for your product and making sure that you're getting what that product is worth or getting most fair pricing that you can without, driving away demand or customers?
Probably the biggest thing is knowing what your cost factor is. I mean, what is it costing you to raise that animal? What is it costing you to process that animal? What are your other labor expenses as far as help on the farm, or if you're taking stuff to events, your labor out there? For us, it's, there's spot fees, there's you have to get permission from different townships. So it's a multi-factored thing where you have to know what your base expense is. And I mean, you can also see what your market is. I mean, what it might be in Harrisburg or Philly might be different to what it is to State College. Seeing what, not competition, but other people that are doing along the same lines as you are charging. So you can be in the market or competitive with everybody else. I mean, you don't want somebody to be selling a ham steak for $6 and you're trying to get 14 for it. You might be making more, but are you going to move your product? I mean, you want to be fair to the consumer, but you also need to be fair to yourself, that the work you're putting in isn't for nothing.
I really like Matt LaRue's meat calculator. I think it's a great tool, making sure that you factor in all your expenses, because I find that a lot of farmers skip some expenses. They don't include that in the final cost. And that's a good way to put yourself out of business pretty fast in some cases. So I would say, knowing your expenses, using a tool like a meat calculator or an Excel, and making sure that you're making all of your business decisions data driven.
I guess the only thing that I would add is maybe that we know that we should be priced higher, right? And this specifically on the beef side, the increase inputs has come very quickly. And so I think that, if you look back to 2020, about approximately half the animals we harvest are born somewhere else and we buy them, mainly Masonic Village and Elizabethtown. But when we purchase those animals, our cost of a calf has gone from $1,100 or $1,200 in 2020 to $3,000 today. It's like a 230 or 40% increase in inputs. And we have not raised our prices enough to account for that. And that's our own fault, right? But you keep thinking, I keep thinking the cycle will shift. I don't know when it will, but I know darn well we're not priced high enough. We would be better off selling our feeder calves right now than we would be running them through the meat business. And that's really hard for a lot of people to comprehend. But when you're getting $3,000 into a 700 or 800 pound calf, and then you have to double the weight of it, and you're getting an $1,100 processing bill, you're getting mysteriously close to $5,000, and you have to really bust your butt to retail that animal for the $6,000 that you deserve.
So we're getting down here to the end of this episode, and I have two more questions, but I want to preface one of them. At the end of every episode, I normally try to do a more fun or just something that's a little outside of what we just talked about. So something that gives you guys free range to just talk it and have a good time. So today's question would be, what is the behind the scenes farm or food business moment customers never get to see but absolutely should?
This reminds me of when I used to do the farmers markets. Everybody thought it was so cool that I got to spend every Saturday with all my foodie friends at the farmers market. And while that does have merit and it is really fun, it takes all day. Like, and the schlepping that is involved, there's a very Pennsylvania Dutch word for you, schlepping. Packing up coolers every morning and making sure that everything's weighed, or taking the scale with you and taking the pop-up tent, packing it all in the car in a very strategic way, setting it up and being there for 4 hours, and then hurrying up and taking everything down so you can try to get home and maybe take a nap before you got to do afternoon chores or whatever. Like, yes, it is fun, but it takes a lot more physical labor than you think it should.
I would say, unfortunately, I can't think of very many really fun things to see behind the scenes. I think Jason kind of mentioned it in the beginning of the podcast. It's probably hard for most people to imagine being on call 24/7, 365 for your entire life. And it's very difficult to get away. And I think that probably people don't realize in order to deliver exceptional customer service, you have to be available. And part of that with us, it's become more difficult with restaurants, but it's not uncommon every single day of the week for me to get a request from a restaurant, and I need to take care of that or somebody else will. The other thing I guess that Jason also alluded to is it's it's probably hard for people to imagine how much you care about these animals, but understanding that you're part of the food supply chain, right? I think that it's important that we're raising a high quality product and we're checking these animals multiple times a day, all day, to make sure that they're under the least amount of stress so that they can be performed to their potential and provide the highest quality product. But I think it's probably difficult to explain that until you actually live our life.
Yeah, probably one thing that is hard for people to fathom, and they would probably chuckle at it, is for us, I mean, especially in the summertime, you're at the mercy of different events and the schedule. So you have to get up and get your chores done in the morning, get the feeding done, make sure everybody's squared away. And then you're in an event all day. And sometimes these events go till 9, 10 o'clock at night. You get home, get product ready for the next day, and then it's back to the barn to check on things. Well, Mother Nature doesn't wait on everybody else's schedule. So you have sows farrowing, whether it be 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And it doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if you just are done for the day. And I remember one night in particular, I got home and it was probably pushing midnight till I got to the barn. And I had a first time sow having little ones, and she was having issues. So after selling product all day, it was time to play maternity ward. And literally, I got a blanket and slept in the crate beside the sow the entire night, pulling pigs to make sure that she, wasn't in distress and whatnot. And I think people would either find that extremely funny or extremely sad that, they don't realize that, like Rob said, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Doesn't matter if it's your birthday, Christmas, if it's snowing, if it's raining, if it's 100 degrees, or if it's minus 20, you have to be there.
In closing, is there any last thoughts or any one idea that you want people to come away with, or producers to come away with from this episode? Either producers that are starting their business or just want to figure it out. Is there any lasting words or thoughts that you want to share at the conclusion of this episode?
For me, the one thing that I was going to say, and I kind of slipped my mind partway through, is I think if you do want to direct market meat, a schedule with the butcher is important. And you keeping that schedule with the butcher is just as important, right? It's so once you have a schedule, it's impossible for the butcher to function if you break that schedule. So even if you have to start small or start slow, do one a week or one every 2 weeks and then work up from there, at least that's better than you canceling on them 30% of the time, because they can't function that way. They have employees and they're depending on you to have the animals there when you say you're going to have them there. And I feel like that's really benefited us is there's times where I wish I had more on the schedule, but the one thing I don't do is stick them with an open spot where they need to find somebody to fill it in.
I think whenever you think about farms that are direct in marketing to the consumer or to restaurants, sometimes there's an idea that there's a lot of competition there. And I would say that there's definitely more community than competition. I think there's room for all of us. I believe I saw a statistic that only 2% of our food is that we consume is locally grown on average across the US. In our region, that's probably a little bit higher just because of our proximity to a lot of farms that are marketing direct to consumer, but there's definitely room for all of us. And like if I run out of something that one of my restaurant accounts needs for the week, I'll just go buy it from a friend. And the restaurant knows like I'm still going to fulfill that order. It might not be mine, but it's going to be a product that I think is close in quality to mine, and also supporting a friend. So I keep that in mind when you're getting started. Those that may appear to be in competition, there's room for all of you.
I feel that the term farm diversity is overused nowadays. I mean, I think it's best to step back, and it's a circumstance where just because your grandfather did it this way or your dad did it this way, you need to step back from your operation and look and what would work best to help our bottom line. It doesn't have to be what this person's doing or that person's doing, but it could be the simplest adjustment that can make the difference in the viability of the farm. Everybody says about diversity, 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 but I think just simple adjustments, if you can find a restaurant that would appreciate a product or anything, just I think a lot of people get stuck in a rut just because that is what they've always done. And sometimes it takes tragedy to pull you out of that rut and make you step back and think, wow, what can I do different? But I think nowadays in farming, with the volatility of all the markets, that's what you need to do is just try to find a niche, for lack of better terms, of what can best fit you in your area. Because like I said, every area is different. Just because something works here or works there, back to what Rob said, out west, they don't have the opportunities that we might have in this general area. But I mean, if you can find that one thing, it can make all the difference in your farming operation.
Maddie, could I add one thing? I also was thinking we as people who do this all the time, and I know the people that, both the other panelists communicate with, there's a big difference between being a farmer and being someone that actually direct markets the product. And I think that that's one place where it sounds easy. Oh, I have cows, to start just selling them to the public. But you need to be able to convey that message to the public in a meaningful, logical way. Not just about how you raise the animal, but about which cut is more tender, which one you can braise, which one is better to grill. And that's probably the one thing maybe that I never expected, is that I'm actually a meat salesperson that happens to have cows. I don't feel like I'm a farmer anymore. And it's really changed where my perspective is.
I agree with Rob. You should definitely have knowledge about the product that you are selling. If you don't know what you are trying to provide to the consumer, then what basis do they have to purchase your product?
Well, I think the conversation here was really good, and I just would like to thank you guys again for coming on here and talking and giving your expertise and experiences. I really do think that they will be helpful for people down the line. So thank you so much for that.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. I would also like to take a quick second to thank our guests, Jason Scott, Jodi Gauker, and Rob Hess, for coming on and sharing their expertise and experience with me today. They took time out of their busy schedule, and I very much appreciate that. If you have any questions about them or their businesses, go ahead and check out their bios linked in the show notes below. As always, if you have any question about direct marketing or selling retail or wholesale meat or any other livestock topic, please reach out to your local livestock educator or visit extension.psu.edu. Thank you so much for listening, and keep an eye out for our next episode.